At Christmas dinner, my husband handed me papers with a smile. "Just sign here, honey, it's for our insurance." I trusted him and signed. The next day, a lawyer knocked on my door and said, "Ma'am, you no longer own this house." My blood froze until I remembered what I'd done the week before. Subscribe to the channel, leave your like and comment from which part of the world you are watching. Get comfortable and relax. Let's begin. The knock on the door was firm and out of place. It was the day after Christmas, a quiet morning meant for leftover ham and silence. I opened the door to find a man in a heavy overcoat holding a leather portfolio. His expression was professionally neutral. "Eleanor Hawthorne?" he asked. "Yes." "My name is Arthur Finch. I'm an attorney representing the new ownership group of this property." He spoke clearly, each word a measured drop. "I've come to discuss the transition. You should have received a formal notice, but as the transfer was expedited, I was asked to deliver a copy in person and confirm your move-out timeline." I stood very still. The cold air from outside was sharp. "My move-out timeline," I repeated. The words felt foreign. "There must be a mistake. I own this house." He opened his portfolio and extracted a single sheet. It was a photocopy of a deed. My eyes scanned it, recognizing the legal description of the land, the address. At the bottom, clear and unmistakable, was my signature. Next to it was Richard's. The document was dated December 23rd, 2 days ago. As you can see, the deed was legally signed over. The sale closed yesterday. The new owners are an investment LLC. They are prepared to be reasonable, allowing you 30 days to vacate, given the holiday season. He held the paper out to me. I did not take it. "I did not sell my house. Your signature is here, Mrs. Hawthorne, and your husband's. The notary's seal is in order. The transaction is complete." He placed the paper on the small table just inside the doorway. "My card is attached. Please direct any questions through me. The new owners prefer not to be contacted directly." He gave a slight nod and turned away. I closed the door. The sound of the latch was loud in the hallway. I walked to the living room and sat on the sofa. The Christmas tree lights were still on, a soft, multicolored glow against the daylight. I looked at my hands. The memory arrived not as a flood, but as a single, precise image: Christmas dinner. The table was set with my mother's china. A roast, glazed carrots, Richard's favorite potatoes. He had been in a fine mood, pouring wine, telling stories. The fire crackled. Later, amid the wrapping paper and the quiet contentment, he had brought his briefcase into the living room. He sat beside me on the couch. "Just one little piece of admin to take care of, Ellie," he said, his voice warm. He pulled out a short stack of papers. "It's for the home insurance. They're updating their policies, need fresh signatures on file. Won't take a second." He flipped to the last page of each document, pointing to a flagged tab. "Here and here, just routine." He handed me a pen. I remember the feeling. The weight of the good meal, the warmth of the fire, the pleasant fatigue of a day spent hosting. I remember looking at his face, a face I had seen every morning for 28 years. I did not read the papers. I trusted the man. I signed my name twice. He kissed my temple. "That's my girl, one less thing to worry about." I sat on my sofa now, in the silent aftermath, and replayed the moment. The casualness of it, the efficiency. He had chosen the perfect time when my defenses were softened by tradition and family illusion. Our son was in the kitchen, loading the dishwasher. Christmas music was playing. It was the ideal camouflage for a theft. I reached for my phone. My fingers were steady. I called Richard. It rang 4 times before he answered. "Ellie, everything all right?" His voice was calm, slightly concerned. The performance was already beginning. "A lawyer was just here. A man named Arthur Finch. He says I no longer own my home. He showed me a deed with my signature from the 23rd. There was a pause on the line, a calculated pause. I could almost hear him deciding which path to take. "Oh, Ellie." The sigh he let out was a masterpiece of regretful confusion. "There must have been a mix-up at the title company. I told them not to file it until after the new year. I wanted to explain everything to you properly." "Explain what, Richard? What did I sign?" It's complicated, sweetheart. I've been restructuring some of our assets. The market is shifting. This was a strategic move to free up capital. The house was just one piece. I was going to tell you, but with Christmas, I didn't want to upset you. The words were smooth, practiced. They slid over the truth like oil. You had me sign over our house without telling me. It's not like that. We'll get another place, something more manageable. This house is too big for us now anyway. It's just bricks and mortar, Ellie. The equity is what matters. His tone shifted, becoming brisk, businesslike. Look, I'm actually tied up right now. Why don't you pack a bag, stay with Miriam for a few days? I've already moved some of my things out. It'll give us both some space to think clearly. The final piece clicked into place. He was already gone. The deed was done, and so was he. You've moved out. Temporarily, it's better this way. Cleaner. I'll call you tomorrow. We'll sort through the details. Another pause. Don't make a scene, Ellie. It's already settled. The lawyer explained it's legal. Just take the 30 days and find a nice rental. I'll be fair with the finances. He hung up. I placed the phone on the coffee table. I looked around the room. Every object held a memory we had chosen together. The books on the shelves, the rug we bought on a trip, the slight discoloration on the wall where the sun hit it every afternoon. It was all just bricks and mortar to him. To me, it was the physical record of a life. The initial shock was receding, replaced by a cold, dense clarity. The grief was there, a sharp ache beneath my ribs, but it was being overtaken by something else. A slow, focused anger. It did not feel hot. It felt like ice forming, hardening, providing a solid surface to stand on. I stood up. I walked to the hallway and picked up the photocopied deed. I studied my own signature. It looked genuine, confident, a signature of trust. I had provided it myself. I went to the bedroom. His side of the closet was half empty. Several suitcases were gone. His toiletries were missing from the bathroom. He had packed methodically, over days probably, while I baked cookies and wrapped presents. I returned to the living room and sat down again. The tree lights twinkled. I watched them for a long time. I thought about the word settled. He believed it was settled. The paper was signed, the law was invoked, his plan was executed. He expected tears, pleading, perhaps a messy emotional collapse. He expected me to pack a bag and go to Miriam's. He had underestimated what 28 years in a home could build. It wasn't just memories. It was resolve. He had taken the foundation from under me, but he failed to see that I was not the house. I was the land, and land remains. I did not pack a bag. I did not call Miriam back yet. I sat in the quiet of the home he had just sold out from under me, and I began to think. The first question was simple. What else had I signed? The second question was more important. What had I not signed? The game, I understood then, was not over. He had just made the opening move, and he had made it against a woman with nothing left to lose and a very long memory. The 30 days he had so generously offered were not a deadline to leave. They were a grace period to plan. The first thing I did was call Miriam. I did not cry. I said, "Richard has done something. I need you to come over." Her response was immediate. "I'm on my way." While I waited, I moved. The paralysis of shock was a luxury I could not afford. I went to Richard's study, a room I had always treated as his private domain. I turned on the light. The large oak desk was neat, the computer gone. The bookshelves held financial texts and binders. I started with the desk drawers. The top drawer contained standard supplies. The second held files labeled with benign titles: tax returns, utilities, vehicle maintenance. I pulled each one out, laying them on the desk. I opened the tax file first. The most recent return was from last year. I flipped through the pages. Nothing seemed unusual at a glance. The third drawer was locked. I stood back and looked at the desk. I tried to think like Richard. He was orderly but not paranoid. He would keep a key somewhere accessible but not obvious. I checked the underside of the center drawer. Nothing. I felt along the back edge of the desk. My fingers brushed against a small metal object taped to the wood. A single key. I unlocked the drawer. Inside were more files, these with handwritten labels. Riverfront Project, LLC Docs, Private. My hands were steady as I lifted them out. Miriam arrived 20 minutes after my call. I heard her car door shut, then her quick footsteps on the walk. I met her at the front door. She took one look at my face and wrapped me in a brief, tight hug. She was a tall woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense posture even in retirement. "Tell me," she said, releasing me and shrugging off her coat. I led her to the study. I showed her the deed from the lawyer. I told her about the phone call. I pointed to the files on the desk. "I found these." The drawer was locked. Miriam did not express shock. Her lips pressed into a thin line. She picked up the deed, read it, and set it down. "Okay," she said. "Let's see what we're dealing with." We sat at the desk, a lamp casting a pool of light on the wood. We opened the private file first. It contained bank statements from an institution I did not recognize. The account was in Richard's name only. The statements spanned the last 18 months. Regular deposits were listed, transfers from our joint account. The amounts were significant, $2,000, sometimes $5,000. The running balance was substantial. "He's been siphoning from our joint account," I said. My voice was flat. "Building a separate war chest," Miriam confirmed. She tapped a statement. "Look at the outgoing wires. This one to a title company 2 months ago, a retainer. He was planning this for a while." The next file, Riverfront Project, contained partnership agreements, architectural sketches for a luxury condo development. Richard's name was listed as a managing partner alongside someone named Carla Vasquez. The projected investment sums were large. "The equity from this house was likely his buy-in," Miriam said. The final file, LLC Docs, held the incorporation papers for something called Hawthorne Vasquez Holdings, LLC. The registered agent was a law firm I didn't know. The articles of organization were dated early November. I sat back in the chair. The evidence was a physical weight on the desk. The betrayal was not a single act. It was a campaign, meticulously planned and funded with our shared money. "He mentioned a business partner on the phone," I said. "Carla." "We need to find her," Miriam stated. "But first, we need to understand what, if anything, you can do legally. A signed deed is a powerful thing." I didn't know what I was signing. "You have to prove fraud, duress, undue influence. That's difficult." Miriam's eyes scanned the room. "He cleaned this place out pretty well, but he's arrogant. Arrogant men make mistakes. They keep trophies or they get sloppy." She stood and began walking around the study, looking at the bookshelves. She ran a finger along the spines. "Anything here that doesn't belong, anything new." I joined her, looking with fresh eyes. The shelves held his old college textbooks, a few novels, binders of archived tax records. Then I saw it. A slim, black leather binder tucked between 2 larger volumes. It didn't match the rest. I pulled it out. It was a receipt book. The top receipt was from a company called Secure Hold Storage. It was a receipt for an annual rental of a safety deposit box. The box number was written in pen. The date was from 6 weeks prior. It was paid in cash. "A safety deposit box," Miriam said, taking the receipt. "He wouldn't keep the key on him. He'd hide it." We searched the study again, more thoroughly. We looked inside books under the desk blotter in the empty pencil cup. We found nothing. Then I remembered something. A week before Christmas, we had argued about money. It was a rare, heated discussion about the cost of a new car he wanted. He had been dismissive of my concerns, which had irritated me. Later that night, feeling unsettled, I had done something unusual. "I have a recording," I said. Miriam turned to me. "Of what?" "Of an argument we had, about finances. He said some things I was so frustrated afterward. I sometimes record my thoughts for my therapist. That night I recorded the tail end of our conversation. I just left my phone on the table. I think I forgot to stop it. I went to my purse, which was hanging in the hall, and retrieved my phone. My hands were not steady now. I navigated to the audio files. I found one dated December 18th. The timestamp showed it was over 40 minutes long. I played a segment. My own voice tense. Just seems like a large expenditure when we're supposed to be conservative. Richard's voice, clear and condescending. "Ellie, you don't understand the liquidity. The capital is tied up in the house, yes, but that's just an asset. It's meant to be leveraged. Carla gets that. She sees the vision. This project is going to free us up. Carla is your partner, not your wife. I'm talking about our security. Our security asterisk is the project. Once we close on the house refinance, the capital injection will. I stopped the playback. Miriam's eyes were wide. He's talking about refinancing the house, but he didn't refinance. He sold it outright and stole the proceeds, she said. He's discussing his plans on that recording. That could be evidence of fraudulent intent. A cold, sharp feeling cut through the numbness. It was the first flicker of leverage. The safety deposit box key, I said. I think I know where it is. I walked out of the study and into our bedroom. I went to my jewelry box on the dresser, a gift from Richard many years ago. It had a false bottom, a small compartment I used for keepsakes. I opened it and lifted the velvet tray. Beneath, next to my grandmother's thin gold ring, was a small, numbered key. It was not a key I had ever seen before. I brought it back to Miriam. It matched the number on the receipt. He hid it in my things, I said, where he thought I would never look and where no one would ever think to accuse him of hiding something. Miriam took the key. We need a lawyer, a good one, and we need to see what's in that box. The grief was still there, a hollow space inside me, but it was filling now slowly with something solid and purposeful. The pieces were no longer just evidence of a crime against me. They were tools. The recording was a tool. This key was a tool. My anger, carefully folded and packed away, was a tool. Tomorrow, I said, we'll find a lawyer tomorrow, and we will visit that storage facility. Miriam nodded. Tonight we make copies of everything. We organize it. We moved to the kitchen table. The Christmas centerpiece was still there, a bowl of pine cones and red berries. We pushed it aside and laid out the documents. The photocopier hummed in the next room. We worked in silence, the only sounds the shuffling of paper and the methodical click of the stapler. My home had been stolen. But in this quiet, systematic response, I began to take back the first thing he had truly underestimated, my own mind. The Secure Hold storage facility was on the industrial side of town, a flat, beige building with a buzzer at the door. Miriam drove. We did not speak much during the ride. I held the key in my hand, feeling the sharp edges of its teeth press into my palm. Inside, the air was cool and smelled of dust and cleaning solution. A clerk at a counter checked our receipt and my ID. She led us through a heavy door into a vault room lined with metal boxes. She pointed to number 217, then left us alone, the door clicking shut behind her. I inserted the key. The lock turned with a solid asterisk clunk asterisk. I pulled the long, narrow box out and carried it to a small table bolted to the floor. Miriam stood beside me. I lifted the lid. There were no stacks of cash, no dramatic secrets. The contents were practical. There was a passport in Richard's name with recent stamps to the Caribbean, a bundle of property titles for land in another state I didn't know he owned, a second set of bank books for offshore accounts, and a single, sealed manila envelope. I opened it. Inside were more documents related to the riverfront project, but these were different. They were preliminary financial projections, handwritten notes in margins, and a memorandum of understanding that contained clauses about regulatory flexibility and expedited permitting. There was a list of names with dollar amounts next to them, which looked like potential investors. At the bottom of the envelope was a small, receipt-sized slip of paper from a notary public, dated December 22nd, the day before our Christmas dinner. It was a receipt for notarizing a single signature. The document number was noted. It was not my signature he had notarized that day. He was preparing for a long time, Miriam said, her voice low in the quiet room. The passport, the offshore accounts, he had an exit strategy. But he didn't take it, I said. He's still here, pushing this project through with Carla. He needs the money from my house to make it work. I picked up the notary receipt. This is the day before the dinner. He was tying up his own loose ends. We took photographs of everything with my phone. We did not take anything. We placed each item back exactly as we found it, closed the box, and locked it. The evidence was safer here, in a place he thought was secret. In the car, Miriam said, we need a lawyer who understands real estate and isn't afraid of a fight. I know someone, Benjamin Clark. He's retired mostly, but he still consults. He hates injustice. Especially around the holidays, he gets motivated. I called his office from Miriam's phone. His secretary put me through after I stated my name and said Miriam Jones had referred me. His voice was a dry, gravelly sound over the speaker. "Eleanor Hawthorne, Miriam said you might call. Can you be here at 2:00? "Yes," I said. "Bring everything you have. Do not speak to anyone else." His office was in an old brick building downtown with a creaking elevator. The waiting area was small, lined with overloaded bookshelves. Benjamin Clark was a man in his 70s, with a full head of white hair and sharp, assessing eyes behind thick glasses. He wore a tweed jacket with leather patches on the elbows. He did not smile. "Sit," he said, gesturing to 2 worn leather chairs facing his desk. The desk was a landscape of precise piles of paper. He listened without interruption as I laid out the facts. I showed him the photocopied deed. I summarized the bank statements, the LLC documents, the safety deposit box contents. I saved the recording for last. "And I have this," I said, connecting my phone to a small speaker I had brought. I played the key segment. Clark's face remained impassive. When it finished, he steepled his fingers. "The deed," he began, "is likely legally binding. You signed it. A court will be reluctant to overturn a property transfer between spouses without overwhelming evidence of fraud. Your word against his with a notarized signature is not overwhelming." I felt a drop in my stomach, but I kept my expression neutral. "However," he continued, his eyes shifting to my phone, "that recording changes the calculus. It demonstrates his intent to deceive you regarding the nature of the transaction. He speaks of refinancing, not selling. He discusses using the house's equity for a business venture you were clearly uneasy about. This suggests a pattern of misrepresentation." "Can we get the house back?" Miriam asked. Clark leaned back, his chair groaning. "A direct lawsuit to rescind the deed. Possible but protracted, expensive, emotionally draining. The new LLC that owns it now is a shield. They are a bona fide purchaser for value, at least on paper. They would fight." He looked at me. "What is your primary objective, Mrs. Hawthorne? Is it to recover the house, or is it to see justice done?" I considered the question. The house was the physical symbol, but the wound was the betrayal, the arrogance, the theft of my security. "I want him to face the consequences of what he did," I said. "I want the theft acknowledged. If I can get the house back in the process, that is my preference. But I will not spend years in court just to hear a judge say he was wrong." A slight nod. "A pragmatic position. Then we must think strategically, not just legally. The law is one tool. Public exposure, financial pressure, regulatory scrutiny, these are others." He tapped a finger on the deed copy. "He committed this act to fund his project. Therefore, the most meaningful consequence would be the failure of that project." "How?" I asked. "Your recording implicates his business partner, this Carla Vasquez, in his deceptive plans. She may not be aware he stole the seed money from his wife. She likely believes it was a legitimate refinance or sale. If she discovers the funds are tainted by fraud, she may withdraw her support. No partner, no project." He paused. "Furthermore, the notary receipt from the safety deposit box. He notarized a signature on December 22nd. What document? We can subpoena the notary's journal. If it was related to the project and improperly executed, it could unravel their permits." He opened a drawer and pulled out a legal pad. "Here is what I advise. Do not announce you are contesting the deed. Let him believe you are defeated looking for a rental. It will make him complacent. In the meantime, we quietly investigate. We authenticate this recording. We subpoena the notary. We compile a dossier on his financial maneuvers, specifically the diversion of marital funds to his separate accounts. Then, we present this information, not to a judge first, but to Ms. Vasquez. And to the IRS, regarding the hidden offshore accounts." "You're suggesting we pressure him to collapse his own deal," I said. "I'm suggesting we apply leverage to the points where he is most vulnerable. His business is one. His freedom could be another if the IRS finds willful tax evasion." Clark's eyes held a glint that was not unkind, but fiercely focused. "This is a chess game, Mrs. Hawthorne. He took your queen with a sly move, but you still have your pieces on the board. You must make him regret looking at you as an opponent to be swept aside, rather than a player in her own right. I looked at Miriam, then back at Clark. The path was no longer a blind fight for my home. It was a targeted campaign. The cold feeling in my chest solidified into a plan. "What is the first move?" I asked. "First, I will have my associate, a forensic audio specialist, verify the recording is unaltered. Second, we file a discreet petition in family court to freeze the remaining joint assets, citing dissipation of marital funds. This will not alert the title company but will put a financial squeeze on him. Third, you will try to locate Carla Vasquez. Observe. Do not engage yet." I agreed. We spent the next hour going over details, signing a retainer agreement. As we stood to leave, Clark spoke again. "Mrs. Hawthorne, he believes he is smart. Use that. The truly intelligent man never underestimates his opponent. He has already failed that test." Walking out of the dim office into the late afternoon light, I felt a shift. The lawyer's visit was not a plea for salvation. It was a tactical briefing. I was no longer just a victim in my own story. I was becoming a strategist in his downfall. The anger had not left. It had been assigned a direction. Returning home after meeting with Benjamin Clark felt different. The house was the same, but my position in it had shifted. I was no longer a resident awaiting eviction. I was occupying a strategic position. The first thing I did was go to the small study I used as a reading room. I closed the door. I connected my phone to my computer and uploaded the audio file. I put on my headphones. I needed to listen to the entire 42-minute recording, not just the segment I had played for Clark. I needed to hear everything my past self had passively captured. The early part was muffled, the phone likely in my purse on the kitchen table. I could hear the clatter of dishes, the running water. Then our voices became clear as we moved into the living room. The argument began predictably. He wanted a new luxury sedan. I questioned the expense, suggesting we wait another year. His tone was patronizing. "You don't track the markets, Ellie. This is about perception. When I meet with backers for the Riverfront project, I need to project success. We have a perfectly good car. Success isn't a new lease payment." A long sigh. "Carla drives a Tesla Model S. It sets a tone. You have to understand, this is how business is done. You can't bring a budget sedan to a multi-million-dollar negotiation." The name, Carla, appeared again. I made a note on a legal pad I had brought in. The conversation spiraled from there. He grew more defensive, revealing details he normally kept shielded. He talked about leveraging assets and unlocking liquidity. He mentioned specific numbers, projected returns, investment minimums. He spoke of regulatory shortcuts and favorable rezoning with a casual confidence that now sounded reckless. Then came the part I had played for Clark. His line about the house equity being just an asset to be used for the project. But the recording continued after our argument ended. I heard my own footsteps leaving the room. A long period of silence followed, broken only by faint rustling. I must have left the phone on the table. I listened, my hand paused over the notepad. Then Richard's voice, low and clear as if he was on the phone. He must have thought he was alone. "No, she signed the refinance papers today. Finally. Took some doing, had to frame it as insurance. Yeah, I know. Once that clears, we'll have the capital injection. Carla, trust me, it's solid. The property is free and clear. This pushes us to the finish line. The notary is lined up for my signature on the partnership adjustment tomorrow. Then we're sealed." A pause. He was listening. No, she'll be fine. She's got her little routines. She'll find a smaller place. It's just a house. She's attached to the asterisk idea of it, not the equity. That's the difference between us. You see the number. She sees the curtains. Another pause. "Tomorrow, 4 p.m. at the usual spot. Have the amended agreement ready." The call ended. A minute later, the recording stopped. I took off the headphones. The silence in the room was absolute. I looked at my notes. Carla, notary, partnership adjustment, 4 p.m. usual spot. He had been on the phone with her. He had celebrated tricking me just minutes after our fight. He had reduced my life to curtains. I opened my laptop. I searched for Carla Vasquez and Riverfront Project. I found a business profile on a professional networking site, a woman in her late 40s with a sharp, confident smile. The profile listed her as a real estate developer. I found a few local news articles quoting her on downtown revitalization. One article from October mentioned a promising new partnership with local financier Richard Hawthorne for a riverfront development. I wrote down the name of her company, Vasquez Development Group. I found the address, a downtown office suite. Then I sat back. The phrase notary tugged at a separate memory, a dull ache of suspicion from weeks ago. I had pushed it down, attributing it to general unease. Now it surfaced with clarity. 3 weeks before Christmas, Richard had been unusually secretive with his paperwork. He had started taking calls in the garden. A feeling, a simple hunch, had settled in my stomach. It was a quiet, persistent thought: protect yourself. I had not known from what, but I had acted on it. I went to the filing cabinet in the corner of the room, where I kept our household documents. Behind the folders for warranties and appliance manuals, there was a slender green folder with a single word on the tab: affidavit. I pulled it out. Inside was a single sheet of paper, stamped and signed by a notary public. The date was December 10th. It was a sworn statement, written in my own hand. It listed in plain language my financial contributions to our home over 28 years, the initial down payment from an inheritance, the monthly budgeting that paid the mortgage when Richard's consulting income was unstable, the cost of the roof replacement, the kitchen renovation, all paid from my salary as a librarian. It stated that these contributions represented a substantial, separate interest in the property, irrespective of the title being in both our names. I had drafted it myself, using an online legal template. I had driven to a notary public in the next town, a stranger, and signed it in front of her. She had asked no questions. I had brought my driver's license and a utility bill. She stamped it, signed it, and recorded it in her journal. I had come home and hidden it. I had not told Richard. I had barely admitted to myself why I did it. It was an impulse, a quiet act of self-preservation sparked by his shifting behavior. Now I held it in my hands. It was not a weapon in itself, but it was a shield. It was a contemporaneous, sworn record of my stake in the marital asset, created before he fraudulently transferred it. Benjamin Clark could use this. It could help establish my equitable interest, complicating any clean sale. It was proof that I was not the passive, ignorant spouse he described to Carla. I was a woman who had built a life and, however quietly, had taken steps to document it. I placed the affidavit on the desk next to my notes from the recording. 2 pieces of evidence born from intuition. One captured his crime. The other defended my claim. I called Miriam. I listened to the whole recording. He was talking to Carla right after our fight. He told her I'd signed the refinance papers. He has a notary appointment for a partnership agreement the next day. Did you get her details? Yes, and Miriam, I said, my eyes on the affidavit. I remembered something else I did last week. Miriam's kitchen table had become our war room. The Christmas tea towels were gone, replaced by neat stacks of paper. Benjamin Clark sat across from me, his glasses perched on his nose as he reviewed the affidavit. Miriam poured coffee for everyone, her movements efficient. "This is excellent," Clark said, tapping the notarized page. "It's a contemporaneous declaration of your separate equitable interest. It doesn't stop the deed transfer, but it lays the foundation for a claim of fraud on the marital estate. It shows you were aware of your contributions, which contradicts any narrative he might spin about you being a disinterested party." He set it aside and looked at the notes I had made from the full recording. The mention of the notary appointment is critical. We subpoena that notary's journal. If the document notarized on the 22nd is the amended partnership agreement for Hawthorne Vasquez Holdings, and if Richard signed it without Carla present, which is likely, given the timing, that's a defective notarization. It could void their agreement. "And the recording itself?" I asked. My associate confirmed it is pristine. No edits, no alterations. It is admissible as evidence. Clark leaned forward, his elbows on the table. "Now we discuss strategy. The objective is not a messy, public court battle over the deed. The objective is to make the house and the entire project toxic to him. We apply pressure until he willingly gives the house back to make the other problems go away. How do we do that? Miriam asked, sitting down with her mug. Three-pronged approach, Clark said, holding up a finger. 1. We present Carla Vasquez with the evidence that her partner is a fraudster who stole his seed money from his wife. We offer her a choice: dissolve the partnership with him voluntarily, or be dragged into the ensuing litigation and possible IRS investigation as a co-conspirator. She strikes me, from her profile, as a businesswoman who values her reputation. She will cut him loose to save her own project. A second finger. 2. Simultaneously, we file an anonymous tip with the IRS regarding the hidden offshore accounts and the diversion of marital funds. We provide the account numbers from the safety deposit box photos. This creates a personal financial crisis for Richard. An audit is a powerful distraction. A third finger. 3. We use the affidavit and the recording to file a quiet motion in family court, not to contest the deed directly, but to freeze all remaining marital assets and place a constructive trust on the proceeds from the house sale. This tells the court the money is in dispute. It complicates his access to the capital he needs. I processed the plan. It was cold, systematic, and targeted his two vulnerabilities, his business and his finances. "And the house?" I asked. "The house is the bargaining chip," Clark said. "Once he is isolated from his partner and under financial scrutiny, we offer him a settlement. He signs the house back over to you, and we agree not to pursue criminal fraud charges or to actively assist the IRS. We also agree to a non-disclosure agreement to protect what's left of his reputation. He gets to avoid jail and total ruin. You get your home back." "He'll never agree," Miriam said. "He will when he has no other choice," Clark replied. "His alternative is a public court case where the recording is played, a furious business partner suing him for fraud, and an IRS audit that could lead to prosecution. He is, at heart, a businessman. He will cut his losses." I looked at the documents spread before us. The recording was the sword. The affidavit was the shield. Clark's plan was the battle map. "What is my role?" I asked. "You are the client. You make the final decisions. But for the plan to work, you must maintain the facade. He believes you are grieving, looking for apartments. You must continue to act that way if he contacts you. Any sign of fight and he might dig in or flee. We need him complacent and overconfident." "In contacting Carla?" I asked. Clark considered. "That should be you. A meeting, woman to woman. She will be more likely to hear you out than to take a call from a lawyer. You present the facts. You play the relevant part of the recording. You show her the deed and the affidavit. You do not make threats. You simply present the reality of her partnership. Let her draw her own conclusions." I nodded. The task was clear. "When do we start?" "Immediately," Clark said. "I will draft the filing for the constructive trust and the asset freeze today. It will be filed first thing tomorrow. Miriam, can you assist with the IRS tip? We need to compile the data cleanly without a trace back to a liener." "I can do that," Miriam said. "A liener, you will call Carla Vasquez's office. Request a brief, private meeting. Use your name, she will know it. She will be curious. Schedule it for tomorrow afternoon if possible. The faster we move, the less time he has to react." We divided the tasks. Clark left with copies of everything. Miriam and I stayed at the table. She opened her laptop to begin organizing the financial data for the IRS submission. I picked up my phone. I found the number for Vasquez Development Group. My hand was steady. This was no longer a personal call. It was a tactical maneuver. A receptionist answered. I spoke clearly. "My name is Alina Hawthorne. I need to schedule a brief, confidential meeting with Ms. Vasquez regarding her partnership with my husband, Richard Hawthorne. It is a matter of some urgency concerning the riverfront project." There was a pause. "Please hold." A minute later, a different voice came on the line. It was cool, professional. "This is Carla Vasquez. What is this regarding, Mrs. Hawthorne?" "It concerns the source of my husband's investment capital," I said. "I have documents I believe you need to see before you proceed any further. I can be at your office tomorrow at 2 o'clock. It will take 20 minutes of your time. Another pause, shorter this time. 2 o'clock is acceptable. I'll have my assistant send you the address. Thank you. I ended the call. Miriam looked at me over her laptop. Well, she'll see me tomorrow. Miriam gave a sharp nod of approval. We worked in silence for another hour, compiling lists of account numbers and dates. The kitchen was quiet, the only sounds the tapping of keys and the occasional turning of a page. The festive atmosphere of the season was entirely absent, replaced by a different kind of focus. As I drove home later, the plan solidified in my mind. Each step was logical. Each move had a countermove. The emotional storm had receded, leaving this clear, cold landscape of action. Richard had thought he was playing a solo game, moving pieces against a passive board. He had not realized I had been studying the rules all along. Now it was my turn to play. The offices of Vasquez Development Group were in a modern building downtown, all glass and steel. I did not go there. At 10:30 that morning, my phone rang with a number I did not recognize. Mrs. Hawthorne, it's Carla Vasquez. I've reconsidered our meeting location. I'd prefer a more neutral setting. Do you know the Daily Grind on 4th Street? I do. Meet me there in an hour. A public place is better for a sensitive discussion. I agreed. Her decision told me two things. She was cautious, and she did not want the conversation on her professional turf where it might be overheard or recorded. It was a smart move. It also meant she was taking me seriously. The Daily Grind was a spacious cafe with high ceilings and plenty of space between tables. I arrived first and chose a table in a back corner. I ordered a tea. I had brought a slim folder containing copies of the deed, the affidavit, and a transcript of the key part of the recording. My phone was in my handbag. Carla Vasquez entered 5 minutes later. She was, as her photo suggested, sharp-eyed, dressed in an expensive-looking pantsuit, her posture conveying controlled energy. She scanned the room, located me, and walked over without hesitation. She did not smile. Mrs. Hawthorne. She sat down, placing her leather portfolio on the table. She did not order a drink. Ms. Vasquez, thank you for meeting me. Your call was intriguing. You said something about the source of Richard's capital. Her gaze was direct, assessing. I did. I opened the folder. I slid the photocopied deed across the table. This is a quitclaim deed for my home, dated December 23rd. It transferred the property from Richard and me to an investment LLC. I signed it believing it was an insurance document. My husband told me it was a refinance. He told you the same thing, according to a conversation he had with you on December 18th. Her expression did not change, but her eyes flickered. A conversation you were privy to. I have a recording. I slid the transcript across next. This is a partial transcript. You can hear him say, she signed the refinance papers today. He was speaking to you. He also mentions a notary appointment for a partnership agreement the following day, the 22nd. She picked up the transcript. She read it slowly. I watched her face. The professional mask remained, but a tension appeared around her mouth. She looked from the transcript to the deed. This shows a sale, not a refinance, she said, her voice lower. Yes, he stole the equity from our marital asset to fund his portion of your project. The money he invested is fraudulently obtained. That has legal implications for the partnership and for the project itself. She placed the transcript down precisely. Do you have this recording with you? I do. I took out my phone and my earbuds. I handed one earpiece to her. She took it without comment. I played the segment, starting from his comment about the refinance papers and ending with his dismissive line about curtains. I watched her. As she listened, her jaw tightened. A flush of anger touched her neck. She removed the earpiece and laid it on the table. He's an idiot, she said, the words clipped. He is a liar, I corrected calmly. And his actions have put you at risk. If this comes out, your project could be tied up in litigation over the source of funds. There could be allegations of conspiracy, even if you were unaware. Your investors will not like that. She leaned back, her eyes never leaving mine. What is it you want, Mrs. Hawthorne? You could have gone to a lawyer. You came to me instead. Why? because a lawsuit is slow and uncertain. I want a faster resolution. I believe you are a businesswoman who did not sign up to partner with a fraudster. I am giving you an opportunity to extricate yourself before the situation becomes public." "And how would I do that?" "You dissolve the partnership with Richard Hawthorne. Immediately, you publicly cite material misrepresentation regarding his financial contributions. You return his invested capital, which is legally disputed, to a court-supervised escrow account. This severs your legal and financial ties to him. It protects your project and your reputation." "And what do you get out of this?" she asked. "I get leverage. With you gone, his project collapses. He is left with no income stream, a frozen asset, and a very angry wife with evidence of fraud. It increases the pressure on him to settle with me." She was silent for a full minute, staring at the papers. "The notary appointment on the 22nd, she said finally. "That was for the execution of the amended operating agreement. He signed it alone. The notary was accommodating. If that notarization is defective, the entire agreement could be challenged." "My lawyer is subpoenaing the notary's journal as we speak," I said. A short, humorless laugh escaped her. "He was so smug, talking about perception about the right car. He said you were not involved in the business. He made you sound like a hobby." She looked at me with a new focus. "You are not what he described." "No," I said, "I am not." She nodded, a decision reached. "I will not be dragged down by his stupidity and his fraud. I have worked too long and too hard on the riverfront project. I will dissolve the partnership. I will have my lawyer draft the notice of dissolution today, citing breach of fiduciary duty and material misrepresentation. I will also file a motion to freeze the partnership assets, including the capital he contributed." "That would be helpful," I said. "But," she continued, "I need something from you, a guarantee that you will not pursue any legal action against me or my company. I acted in good faith. I was deceived as well." "My lawyer can draft a mutual release of claims," I said, "conditional upon you following through and providing me with a copy of the dissolution filing." "Acceptable." She extended her hand across the table. I took it. Her grip was firm and brief. "He played us both," she said, gathering the copies I had given her. "But he played you worse. I am sorry for that." "Thank you." She stood. "My lawyer will be in touch with your lawyer. This meeting never happened." "Agreed." She walked out of the cafe, her steps quick and purposeful. I remained at the table, finishing my now cold tea. The meeting had gone exactly as Benjamin Clark predicted. Carla was pragmatic, not sentimental. She saw the risk and cut it away. Richard was now isolated. I sent a brief text to Miriam and Clark. Meeting concluded. CV is dissolving partnership. Will cooperate. The response from Clark came a minute later. Excellent. Asset freeze petition filed. IRS package submitted. Phase 1 complete. I put my phone away. I looked around the cafe at the ordinary people drinking coffee, reading, talking. My life had fractured, but in this public, unremarkable place, I had just recruited an unexpected ally. The plan was no longer a theory. It was in motion. Richard's foundation, built on lies and stolen money, was beginning to crack, and he did not yet know it. The calls and filings happened in a quiet flurry over the next 48 hours. Benjamin Clark handled the official channels. Miriam managed the anonymous submissions, using a secure public terminal at the library. My role was to wait and to maintain the facade. On the morning of December 24th, Clark called me. The dissolution notice from Vasquez's lawyers was delivered to Richard's temporary office at 10 a.m. The petition for a constructive trust on the house proceeds was filed and served on the LLC at 11. The IRS and state bar tips were submitted yesterday. The storm is seated. Now we wait for it to land. "How long?" I asked, looking out my kitchen window at the gray winter sky. "The legal notices he has already received. The financial and regulatory actions will take a few days to process. He will likely have a very unhappy new year." "Good," I said and meant it. "Enjoy your Christmas Eve, Aliner. Do nothing. Say nothing. Let him spin in the wind." I spent the afternoon in a state of purposeful calm. I baked a pie, something I had not done since before the betrayal. The methodical actions, measuring flour, rolling dough, were a form of meditation. The house filled with the scent of cinnamon and apples. Miriam arrived at 5 o'clock with her daughter, Sarah, and Sarah's 2 young children. They brought a casserole and laughter. The children's energy was a bright, chaotic force that pushed the silence out of the corners of the house. "Grandma Miriam said you could use some company," Sarah said, hugging me. She knew only that Richard and I were separating, not the specifics. I was grateful for the discretion. We ate a simple meal at the kitchen table. The children chattered about Santa. I listened, allowing their excitement to be a buffer against my own thoughts. Miriam caught my eye across the table and gave a small, firm nod. It was a look of solidarity. After dinner, the children wanted to watch a Christmas movie. We settled in the living room, the tree lights providing the only illumination. I sat in my usual armchair. For the first time since the lawyer's visit, the room did not feel like a crime scene. It felt like a shelter. My phone buzzed once during the movie. A text from Richard. "Merry Christmas, Ellie. Hope you're doing okay. We'll talk next week about the details." The bland, performative concern was jarring against the warmth in the room. He was checking on my state of mind, ensuring I was still pliable. I typed a short reply, following Clark's directive to maintain the facade. "Merry Christmas. I'm managing." I did not ask about his plans. I knew what his plans were. Carla's lawyer had CC'd Clark on the dissolution email. It mentioned a mandatory partnership meeting scheduled for 9 a.m. on the 26th at Richard's rented penthouse to discuss the unwinding of assets. Richard, believing he was still in control, had decided to host a lavish Christmas Eve party at that same penthouse tonight, a show of strength for his remaining associates, his last performance. As the movie ended and the children grew sleepy, I walked to the front window. Miriam's house was just a few streets over. I could see the glow of her porch light. Beyond that, in the distance, the downtown skyline glittered. Somewhere up there, in a sleek tower, Richard was holding court, drinking expensive champagne, utterly unaware that the floor beneath him was already crumbling. Sarah bundled the children into their coats. "Thank you for having us, Aunt Ellie," she said. "It felt like old times." "It did," I said, and for a moment it was not a lie. After they left, Miriam stayed behind to help clean up. We worked in companionable silence, washing dishes, wrapping leftovers. "He texted," I said, handing her a plate to dry. "And?" I replied that I was managing. "He's having his party tonight." Miriam snorted. "Let him. Tomorrow, the hangover will be more than from champagne." We finished in the kitchen. The house was quiet again, but the echo of laughter remained in the air. Miriam put on her coat. "You're going to be all right, Ellie, however this ends." "I know," I said, and I did. The outcome was uncertain, but my own resilience was not. The woman who had signed those papers in blind trust was gone. In her place was someone who had built a case, secured an ally, and set a legal and financial trap. The grief was still present, but it was no longer defining. It had been compartmentalized, a closed room in a house I was learning to navigate. I locked the door after Miriam and turned off the main lights, leaving only the Christmas tree glowing. I sat on the sofa and looked at the soft colors reflected in the window. I thought about the anonymous packages of information now sitting in government inboxes. I thought about Carla Vasquez, who would be preparing her next moves. I thought about the notary, who would soon be explaining her lax practices to the state bar. The mechanisms of revenge were no longer in my hands. They were in motion, following their own bureaucratic and legal paths. My work was done for now. There was a strange peace in that. Outside, a light snow began to fall, dusting the quiet street. Inside, my home was warm and still. For the first time in a week, I did not feel like a stranger in it. I felt like a keeper, a guardian, and soon I would be a claimant. I sat there for a long time, watching the snow, until the last of the tree lights automatically switched off, leaving me in the comforting dark. The days between Christmas and New Year's Eve passed with a strange, suspended quality. I performed the ordinary tasks of life. I grocery shopped. I returned a library book. I took down the Christmas decorations, carefully wrapping each ornament in tissue paper. The house, stripped of its festive layers, felt bare but clean, a blank slate. Miriam called on the morning of the 27th. Her voice was crisp with satisfaction. "It's in the business section. Small column, but it's there." I opened the newspaper on my tablet. The headline read, "Vasquez Development dissolves Riverfront Partnership." The article was brief, quoting a press release from Carla Vasquez's firm. It stated that Vasquez Development had terminated its partnership with Richard Hawthorne due to material misrepresentations regarding financial contributions and a breach of fiduciary duty. It noted that the future of the Riverfront project remained secure under Vasquez's sole direction. There was no quote from Richard. "She moved fast," I said. "She's protecting her asset," Miriam replied. "The notice of dissolution is legal. The public statement is strategic. She's isolating him completely." An hour later, Benjamin Clark called. "The notary has been contacted by the state bar. She's panicking. She admitted to notarizing Richard's signature on the partnership amendment without the other party present. She claimed he told her it was an emergency. She's willing to provide a sworn statement to that effect to avoid disciplinary action." "What does that do?" I asked. "It invalidates the amended operating agreement. It means his formal stake in the project is null. Carla is already dissolving it, but this gives her even more legal cover and leaves him with no claim to any of the assets. He's not just out, he was never properly in." Clark continued. "Also, the constructive trust filing has been acknowledged by the court. The proceeds from the house sale are officially frozen in the LLC's account. They cannot be disbursed to him without a hearing, and the IRS has initiated an inquiry. He should be receiving a formal notice any day now." "Thank you, Benjamin." "The pressure is applied, Alina. Now we wait for the reaction." I did not have to wait long. That afternoon, I needed to go to the bank to update my personal account information, removing Richard as a signatory. It was a procedural task, one I had delayed. The main branch was downtown, not far from the financial district where Richard had his temporary office. As I finished at the teller's window, I saw him. He was standing on the sidewalk outside a different bank, one he used for his business. He was wearing a tailored coat, but his posture was all wrong. He was hunched over his phone, one hand pressed to his forehead. Even from across the street and through the glass door, I could see the agitation in his movements. He was speaking intensely into the phone, his free hand gesturing in sharp, frustrated arcs. I stepped back into the shadow of the bank's lobby. I watched. He pulled the phone away from his ear, stared at it, then put it back to his head, dialing furiously. He began to pace a short, tight line on the pavement. A man in a suit exited the bank and approached him, speaking quietly. Richard's response was visibly angry. He pointed a finger at the man's chest. The man took a step back, held up his hands, and retreated inside. Richard ended his call and stood still for a moment, his shoulders slumped. He looked up and down the street, as if unsure which way to go. The confident strut was gone. This was the posture of a man whose coordinates had suddenly shifted, leaving him disoriented. I felt no pity. I observed him as I would a specimen under glass, a study in collapsing systems. The business partner was gone. The money was frozen. The authorities were circling. His plan, which had seemed so clever and contained, was leaking from every seam. My phone vibrated. A text from Miriam. "He's been calling my house phone. He doesn't have my cell. He's looking for you. Sounds desperate." I texted back, "I know, I see him." I watched him finally shove his phone into his pocket and walk briskly down the street, his head down against the wind. He did not look like a victor. He looked like a man running late for his own disaster. I exited the bank and walked to my car, parked in the opposite direction. The cold air felt clean. The encounter had not been planned, but it was instructive. He was unraveling, and he had no idea why the threads were pulling loose. He would suspect Carla. He might suspect bad luck or a bureaucratic error. It would likely take him a little longer to connect the cascade of failures to the quiet wife he believed was packing her curtains. When I arrived home, there was a single message on my landline answering machine. His voice was strained, trying for calm and missing by a wide margin. Ellie, it's Richard. We need to talk. Something's come up. A few business complications. It might affect the timeline for your move. Call me back as soon as you get this. He was testing, probing to see if I knew anything, if I was the source of the complications. He was also trying to reassert control, framing it as a concern for my asterisk timeline. I did not call back. I erased the message. I followed Benjamin Clark's directive, let him spin in the wind. His confusion was a necessary component of the plan. The more isolated and desperate he became, the more likely he would be to accept the settlement we would eventually offer. That evening, I lit a fire in the fireplace. I made a simple dinner. The house was silent, but the silence no longer felt like an absence. It felt like a space I was choosing to occupy. The storm I had helped set in motion was now raging in his world, not mine. I could hear the distant thunder in his frantic phone calls, in the official notices landing in his mailbox. Here, by my own hearth, there was only the quiet crackle of wood and the steady certainty of my next move. The tide had turned. He just didn't know he was already underwater. The doorbell rang at 7 o'clock on New Year's Eve. I had been expecting him. I had prepared. Miriam and Benjamin Clark were seated in the living room, out of direct view from the foyer. A small digital recorder was in my pocket, its record button already pressed. I had started it when I saw his car pull up. I opened the door. Richard stood on the porch, his face pale, his eyes bloodshot. He wore the same coat from the bank, but it looked rumpled now. He did not wait for an invitation. "We need to talk," he said, pushing past me into the hallway. "Now!" He stopped when he saw the coats on the rack that were not his. "We can talk in the living room," I said, closing the door. I walked past him. He followed, his steps heavy. He entered the living room and froze. Miriam sat in the armchair by the fire, her hands folded in her lap. Benjamin Clark sat on the sofa, a leather-bound notebook on his knees. The overhead light was on, bright and unforgiving. "What is this?" Richard's voice was tight. "This is a conversation," I said, standing near the fireplace. "You said we needed to talk. I thought it best to have witnesses. You remember Miriam, and this is Benjamin Clark, my attorney." Richard's eyes darted from Clark to me, a flicker of understanding, then anger. "You did this." "I did many things," I said. "Please sit down." He remained standing. "You turned Carla against me. You froze the assets. What did you do, Ellie? What lies did you tell?" "I told the truth," I said. "Which is more than you ever did. Sit down, Richard. You'll want to hear this." He hesitated, then sank into the empty chair opposite Miriam. He looked at Clark. "Whatever she's paying you, I'll double it to walk out that door right now." Clark did not smile. "I am not for sale, Mr. Hawthorne, and I am ethically bound to represent my client's interests, which currently involve cleaning up the legal mess you created." Richard turned back to me. "What do you want?" "First, I want you to understand the situation," I said. My voice was calm, a tone I had practiced. "Your partnership with Carla Vasquez is dissolved. She filed the notice after I provided her with evidence that your investment capital was fraudulently obtained through the sale of this house under false pretenses." "That's not fraud. You signed the deed." "I signed a document you told me was for insurance. You discussed it as a refinance on a recording you did not know I had." I took the small speaker from the mantel and connected it to my phone. I played the segment. His voice filled the room, talking about the refinance papers, about curtains. His face drained of color. He stared at my phone as if it were a venomous snake. "That recording," I continued, "has been verified by a forensic expert. It is admissible evidence of your intent to defraud me. Furthermore, the notary you used for your amended partnership agreement has provided a sworn statement to the state bar that she notarized your signature without Carla Vasquez present. That invalidates the agreement." "You bitch," he whispered. "Language, Mr. Hawthorne," Clark said mildly. "There's more. We have filed a motion for a constructive trust on the proceeds from the sale of this house. The funds are frozen. We also submitted a comprehensive report to the IRS regarding your undisclosed offshore accounts and the diversion of marital funds. You should be receiving an audit notice shortly." Richard was silent. He looked at each of us. The scale of it was settling on him. His business was gone. His money was frozen. The government was involved. His escape routes were closing. "Why?" he asked, the word a hollow sound. "You stole my home," I said. "You planned it for months. You lied to my face on Christmas. You took 28 years of my life and treated it as a line item. You do not get to ask why." "It was just money, just a house." "It was my life," I said, "and you treated it like a petty cash box. Now you face the consequences: criminal fraud, tax evasion, financial ruin, professional disgrace." He leaned forward, his hands gripping his knees. "What do you want, Ellie? Just say it." "I want a settlement," I said. "You will sign a new deed, returning full and sole ownership of this house to me. You will instruct the LLC to release the frozen sale proceeds back to the title company, who will void the original transaction. You will sign a financial agreement, providing me with a lump sum from your remaining personal assets as compensation for the dissipation of marital funds. In return, I will not pursue criminal charges. My lawyer will provide the IRS with no further assistance. We will sign a mutual non-disclosure agreement. You will walk away, and you will never contact me again." He laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Or what? You'll destroy me." "I already have," I said. "This offer is your only path to avoiding prison. The evidence is compiled. The authorities are alerted. Carla Vasquez is prepared to testify that you defrauded her as well. You have no partners, no liquidity, and very few options." He looked at Clark. "Is she bluffing?" Clark opened his notebook. "I have here copies of the dissolution filing, the notary's sworn affidavit, the court filing for the constructive trust, and the cover letter of the IRS submission. Would you like to see them?" Richard slumped back in the chair. The fight left him visibly, like air from a punctured tire. He looked at me, and for the first time I saw not anger or condescension, but a kind of fearful recognition. He was seeing me, the strategist, not the wife. "You set this all up," he said. "I responded to your actions," I corrected. "You created the situation. I simply navigated it to a favorable conclusion." Silence hung in the room, broken only by the crackle of the fire. The clock on the mantel ticked toward the new year. "I need a lawyer," he said finally. "You do," Clark agreed. "I would recommend you retain one by January 2nd. We will have the settlement documents ready. If they are not signed by January 5th, we will proceed with both civil and criminal filings. The offer is time-sensitive." Richard stood up. He did not look at Miriam or Clark. He looked only at me. There was a bewildered respect in his gaze. "You recorded me." "Yes." He shook his head slowly, then walked out of the living room. I heard the front door open and close. A moment later, his car started and drove away. I stopped the recorder in my pocket. I let out a long breath. My hands were steady. Miriam stood and came to my side, putting a hand on my shoulder. Clark began packing his notebook into his briefcase. "He'll sign," Clark said. "He has no other move." I nodded. The confrontation was over. The victory was not in his anger or his insults. It was in his silence. It was in the moment he realized the game was lost, and that I had been holding the rule book the entire time. The old year was ending. A new one was beginning in a house that would soon, irrevocably, be mine. He signed the settlement papers on January 4th. His lawyer, a harried-looking man with a briefcase that smelled of stale coffee, met with Benjamin Clark in a conference room at Clark's office. I was not present. Clark called me afterward. "It's done. The deed has been rescinded. The title company will re-record it in your name alone by the end of the week. The financial settlement has been wired to your new account. The non-disclosure agreement is executed. He is out." I stood in my kitchen, the phone to my ear. I looked out at the backyard, the bare branches of the oak tree outlined against the winter sky. "Thank you, Benjamin." "You did the work, Elinor. I just provided the legal framework. It was a pleasure." The next few weeks were occupied with practicalities. I changed the locks. I updated the title insurance. I met with a financial advisor to manage the settlement funds. The house was officially, legally, solely mine. The knowledge settled into the walls, into the floors, a quiet fact as solid as the foundation. In late January, I decided to host a gathering. I did not call it a party. I called it a house rewarming. I invited Miriam, her family, a few close friends from my years at the library, and Benjamin Clark. I also invited Carla Vasquez. She sent her regrets but a generous bouquet of flowers with a card that read, "To New Beginnings, CV." On a cold, bright Saturday afternoon, the house filled with people and noise. The dining table was laden with food everyone brought. Children ran through the hallway. Talk and laughter echoed in rooms that had been too quiet for too long. Miriam found me in the kitchen, refilling a platter. "It feels different in here," she said. "Lighter." "It is different," I agreed. Later, as the afternoon sun slanted through the windows, I asked for everyone's attention. The room grew quiet. I stood in the doorway between the living room and the dining room. "Thank you all for coming," I said. My voice was clear. "This house has been my home for a very long time. Recently, I was reminded that a home isn't just something you have. It's something you protect and something you share. I'm fortunate to have the chance to do both again." I paused. People were listening, their faces warm and open. For years, I worked as a librarian. I believe in the power of a shared story and a shared space. So, I've decided to convert the small sunroom off the back hall into a community library nook. It will be open to anyone who needs a quiet place to read or who wants to borrow a book. It will be stocked from my own collection and from donations. Miriam has already volunteered to be the chief librarian. There was a ripple of laughter and applause. Miriam gave a regal nod. "This is my way of saying thank you," I continued, "for your friendship and for reminding me that a house becomes a home through the people in it. Please enjoy the rest of the afternoon." The conversation resumed, louder and more cheerful. Benjamin Clark approached me, a cup of punch in his hand. "A community library, a fine idea, a lasting legacy." "It feels right," I said. "He's left the state, you know," Clark said quietly. "The IRS matter is ongoing for him, but he complied with our terms. He won't trouble you again." "I know." As the party wound down and people began to leave, hugging me and promising to bring books, I felt a profound sense of closure. The vengeance was complete, but it was not the victory I now cherished. The victory was this: the deed in my name, the friends in my home, the plan for a future of my own design. Finally, only Miriam remained, helping me with the final cleanup. We stood at the sink, washing the last of the glasses. "You're really going to do it, the library?" she asked. "Yes, the contractor starts next week. Simple shelves, good lighting, a comfortable chair." "It's a good thing, Ellie." "It is." After Miriam left, I walked through the empty, clean house. I stopped in the sunroom, the future library. The evening light was fading, painting the walls in shades of gold and blue. I could see it clearly. Shelves along one wall, a reading lamp in the corner, a basket for returns by the door. I walked to the front window and looked out at the street. My street. My house. The betrayal had been an earthquake, but the aftershocks had settled. In their place was this solid, quiet certainty. The revenge had been precise and satisfying, but the redemption was better. He had tried to reduce my life to an asset to be liquidated. In response, I had not just reclaimed the asset. I had reinvested it in myself and in my community. The house was no longer just a memory of a shared life. It was the foundation of a singular one. I turned away from the window, turned on the lamp beside my chair, and picked up the book I had been reading. The silence around me was no longer an absence. It was a presence. It was mine.